What's up, everyone? My name is Joshua, and welcome to Conversations with Joshua T Berglan. Today, we have Mr. Herbie Kay on, and we're going to be discussing the 1964 plan. I'm going to scan through this website. Yesterday, I was supposed to interview someone else. I got an email from him, and I didn't know it was him. So I sent him a different link, and then I pop on. So what I'm getting at is this. I had the opportunity to meet Herbie before the interview, which doesn't normally happen. The only reason we got to meet is because he jumped on a day early. And I'm not knocking him because I do crap like that all the time. But I got to know him. And I can honestly, sincerely tell you, and I'm excited about every broadcast. You have to understand, this is a blessing for me to get to do. This is a dream for me. And mind you, being in front of a live audience, having a crowd, I've got a big vision for what the world's mayor experience will become. But this is a gift to me. Not everybody that does podcast and broadcast and live streams are obsessed with it and want to do it. Like, this is a childhood dream for me. So I just want to get this out of the way. I am grateful for the opportunity to broadcast and to get to interview every single guest because, well, yeah, I'm getting to promote them and they're coming here and I'm doing a service for my guest. I love doing this. This is a blessing for me. But not all guests are as great as the other guests. And I have amazing guests, amazing humans, very interesting people. Herbie, I don't know much about him, except for the fact that he is freaking hilarious. He's a lot of fun. He's very witty. He made me laugh a lot. I almost just went ahead and interviewed him yesterday, but I was afraid that I wasn't going to have time because I've only had a little bit of time. And I feel like I'm going to talk to Herbie for a long time. I don't know how long this interview is going to go, but it's going to go. So look at this. Decadence is not liberty. Coercion is not caring. Oh, I love this. Together, we're going to eradicate mass murder, homelessness, human trafficking, violent crime, and addiction. I know this life. Everything on here except mass murder. Although I've witnessed mass murder. We all have. Especially if you're over the age of 10. Anyway, I'm digging this. To restore the nuclear family and reestablish safety, decency, and community. Now, when people talk about traditional nuclear family, they have different meanings. I'm not going to assume what he means. I want to say this out of the gate. I don't care if you're gay, you're bi, you're trans, whatever. If you're not hurting other people and you're showing love and you're living in your gifts and your talents and you're living in your purpose for what God created you for, I'm not going to have a problem with you. In fact, even if you're not living in God's purpose, I don't necessarily have a problem with you. I won't relate with you because I believe that we all have a purpose and we all have this unique opportunity to exercise our gifts and our talents to be a blessing to other people. I will align with anyone on that. Anyone. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your sexuality is. I don't care if you believe that women should be home making dinner at 5 o'clock or you believe that women should be in the workforce running companies or running countries. None of that matters to me. That's getting lost in the weeds. And mind you, I think that there is an attack on the family unit, but that's a little gross and disturbing. And there's reasons, there's an agenda. There was a reason for the male created feminist movement. Yeah, there's reasons for all that. And this is a deep dive into a whole other conversation. So I want to say, just out of the gate, I don't know what his definition of traditional nuclear family is, but the woman stays home, raises a kid stuff, that doesn't register in my world. Now, in theory, that sounds wonderful, but the last time that we had that, I seem to remember a lot of men, of course, I wasn't alive then, but I believe that a lot of men took advantage of those opportunities. You know, they're going to happy hour after work, coming home drunk, they're cheating with, like all of these different things. I don't believe that a woman should just stay home because that's her role. That's, to me, is bullcrap, because I have a partner and Jessica, who could lead any giant corporation on the planet. She could be a teacher. She could run a school. She could run a home. She can do all those things. So I don't believe that telling women what they should do is necessarily the right thing. And I'm not saying that he's saying that. I just want to say my 2 cents on it. So other than that, I don't even know what he believes. But I want to say this. I align with everything else. And Herbie is freaking awesome. This is going to be a lot of fun. Probably the longest rambling introduction I've ever had. But that said, this is going to be interesting. Strap in, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mr. Herbie K from the 1964plan.org. Welcome to the World's Mayor Experience, Conversations with Joshua T Berglan. Thank you for being here. Okay, I hit record because the mistake that I made yesterday was that I wasn't recording when we first started talking, and it was off the rails hilarious. So I don't want to miss a moment. So I'm failing to do a proper introduction, but ladies and gentlemen, this is the guy I was telling you about, the 1964 plan man, Mr. Herbie K. Okay, I want to ask you something out of the gate, because when I was going through your website in the introduction, I love that you want to end homelessness, and violence, mass murder, all of that. But one of the things that you talk about is bringing back the nuclear family, the traditional nuclear family. Can you describe what that means to you? Like, what is that?
Well, it's the same definition as the last 10,000 years of civilization's history. Okay, it's a husband, a wife, supporting and raising children together with their respective talents, like has been the case in every other culture in the history of humanity, in every religion, every region, every continent, just the way it was. Why we think somehow that we are smarter than the entire span of history blows my mind. And when I did time in prison, I'm just telling you that the reason for all the, for example, we're recording this right after the Lewiston mass murder that took place. And they're out there still looking for the maniac that did it. I bet you blind that there's a 99 out of 100 chance that guy is the product of a single parent family. I know, now it's not always true, but for example, CNN did a survey, the wrong word, a study about 5 years ago up to that point of all the mass murderers in the 21st century, all but one were the product of single parent families. That's regardless of gender, regardless of religion. You know, I understand that there are lots of reasons why that cat is out of the bag, but if we don't put the family back, then we're fucked. Pardon my language. Am I allowed to say fucked?
You can say fucked. And it's probably appropriate for for the situation that we're in. I think fuck is appropriate.
We're fucked. Because what's going on, man, it's really simple, Josh. Look, we have this world of accelerating technology. So through the span of history, until the 20th century, until about roughly 1908, 1910, mankind wallowed, except for the outfits and a slight change in the weaponry. We all lived about the same for all that period of time. People, if you lived to be in your mid-40s, you were an old man or an old woman. Not most women, but a third of women died in childbirth. That's why everyone got married so young. It was not unusual for most of your children to die before they reached adulthood. Look at Abraham Lincoln's kids, just one example. Only one actually reached adulthood. And that was not unusual for the time. And then, for all that period of time, we had the traditional nuclear family. Now, modern feminists who are really nihilists, I hate I consider myself an anti-feminist feminist in the sense that, do I think there should be equal pay for equal work? Of course, but there already is. You know, the charge that isn't the case is a statistical bullshit story. I don't want to get down in too deep into the weeds, but that happens to be true. But when we discovered oil in Pennsylvania in 1859, and then began using it as fuel at the end of the 19th and early 20th century. That changed everything. I realized that it's popular to beat the shit out of fossil fuels, but that's what kicked off the technological development. That's why suddenly we went from no middle class, agrarian society, to where it took 8 people to grow the food for the 10. In other words, our agricultural, this is a good example of what's happened. It used to be that 80% of the population up until the 20th century worked in agriculture because it took 80% of the population to provide food for 100%. Today, it's less than 2%. And that's because of fossil fuels. In fact, now it's less than 1% of our population can not only grow food for all of us, but for the whole world besides. The only reason there are starving people in the world is politics, not lack of food. Don't ever get confused for that bullshit. Amen. Okay, we've got tons of food, and we have a lot of crazy people here in the West. This is a slight digression, but my family business was produce, so it's something I really understand. No one's ever been killed or hurt by genetically modified organisms, by GMO. I don't know why people have a hard on for GMOs. GMOs are what saves the world from starvation. It's all that means is modifying the genetics of a plant so that it survives better in the environment where it's grown. That's it. That's what a GMO is. So you get a better yield.
Time out. So are you saying that it doesn't change the bioavailability of that food or rob it of its nutrients?
I'm not. I don't bullshit about things I don't know, and I don't know if that's true. But regardless of whether it robs it of some of its nutrients or its bioavailability, you have to put in context. If you get the yellow corn, which is a big GMO right now in the world because it's resistant to insects and disease, even if that rice is less nutritious than naturally grown white or brown rice, which, by the way, there's no difference in nutrition between white and brown rice. That's another fucking myth. But anyway, but we pass around shit like we really know what we're talking about when we don't. We think, well, it's brown, it must be better than white, but it's not. Just like brown eggs are exactly the same as white eggs, guys. It's just the color of the shell. I mean, if you like brown eggs, by all means, get brown eggs, but they're not better. So anyway, it's kind of, the alternative isn't non-GMO or GMO in most of the world. The choice is starve to death or not. And you can grow a hell of a lot more rice with a hell of a lot less water and a hell of a lot less insect problems by using genetically modified organisms. And there is no case of anyone ever dying from a GMO. Not one. Okay, so this hysteria, this is just typical of modern hysteria. I don't know why I went down to the fucking GMOs, Josh. I have no fucking idea. But anyway, back to the traditional nuclear family. So, I don't know. I'm a digressor, you know that. So the bottom of, and by the way, you got to pay attention because when I start digressing at my age, I can lose where the fuck I was. So I'll need you to help me out.
I'm paying attention, so you're fine.
Oh, okay. Good. So anyway, back on traditional nuclear family. As the world is computing has made technologies advances speed up, and it's getting faster and faster and faster. And now we're on the cusp of AI, which is the big, catchphrase now, AI. Yeah. First of all, before we all get too freaked out by AI, the current IQ of the world's best AI is slightly better than an earthworm. And I'm not saying this to be funny. I'm saying that the machine has no self-recognition. Okay, it spits out data in response to data put in, but it's not thinking. Don't. Everyone needs to take a chill pill. The Terminator's not coming for a while yet, but he's coming.
He's coming.
And if we, oh yeah. Well, I mean, if you want me to really get crazy, if we pull this off right, what's going to happen is that humanity and machine is going to merge ultimately. I mean,
singularity.
I just think it's if we don't kill ourselves, I think it's almost inevitable because it would introduce concept in humanity that we don't. If we want to travel to stars and travel to solar systems and explore other places and get out of Earth before the sun burns up, and by the way, it's a big if we last that long. I mean, the dinosaurs lasted much longer than we have so far before the big meteors hit. So, we'll see. But if we somehow manage to get there, it will be as a combined life form, which then makes Einstein theory of relativity. It makes relativity. Look at me, I'm fucking senile. It makes relativity irrelevant, because the amount of relativity says basically you can't travel faster than the speed of light. Now, is there such a thing as warp drive? Can we find a way to go faster than the speed of light, like in a Star Trek movie? Theoretically, it's possible, but maybe not. We don't even know what we don't know. So even if that's the case, and the best we can do is build a starship that travels at the speed of light, which means that at the speed of light to travel to the nearest star where we have found a planet that we think there might be life on, it's about 11 light years away. So at the speed of light, it would take 11 years for the ship to get there. And if they turned around the same day, 11 years to get back. But on Earth, a couple of hundred years would have gone by, which is how time bends in relativity. The point is, when we become a singularity with machines, it won't matter. We'll all be basically living forever. The people that are alive in those days, that won't be people and they won't be machines. But to get to that place, okay, assuming that that's a place, I don't know that there's really any choice but to get to that place, frankly. But to get to that place, we have to not destroy ourselves. And to do that, you have to have a foundation on the house. And that foundation has always been and will always be the traditional nuclear family, which is an extremely adaptable institution with roles that are vital to raise a healthy adult human being. Like, without a father, you don't learn boundaries and you don't learn deferred gratification. Those are the two most important lessons that fathers teach generally. And then to their daughters, they teach the most important lesson of all, which is you're not a slut. You have a value in the world. So without all these things, what we've done is created a society of sodomites. It's like, the term I use is sodomites on parade. And if we don't calm it down and take that out of the mainstream, we're fucked. Okay, I went as far as I need to go with that.
Okay, time out. But I'm about to I'm going to drag you back into the hole, I think. Okay. Where does that, in your world, where does that place homosexuals, bisexuals, and transsexuals and the 85 other sexualities that exist?
Okay, so first of all, you're either straight or you're gay, and then this is Herbie's theory on sexuality. I mean, this is going to be, I've literally never discussed this with anybody out in the open, but okay, here we go. What the fuck? So I see sexuality as a spectrum. Okay, so let's call it on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, 1 is you're an absolute heterosexual. No, you're an absolute homosexual. And 10 is you're an absolute heterosexual. And then there are degrees in between. And unless you're lying, there are very few people on the planet Earth who have not at some point in their life been attracted, even for a fleeting moment, to someone of the same gender.
Oh,
okay,
my.
Okay, look, and there's only 2 genders, boys and girls. That's it. I don't want to get into the bullshit slicing and... Okay, that's bullshit. That doesn't even... That is evidence of the depravity and degeneracy and sodomy that we have slunk into, that popular culture and so-called professionals like doctors, psychologists, and psychiatrists have the temerity to even endorse such a stupid fucking idea. It doesn't even bet. And by the way, again, I keep digressing off my digressions. I have a lot of gay friends, straight, a male and female. In fact, my dog sitter who watches my dog when I travel is a lesbian. And I've talked to her for many, many hours about this. She never asked to join that club. The LGBTQIA plus. I'm just telling you how she relates it to me. And I have another friend who's gay, a guy who's told me the exact same thing separately. Okay. Which is, don't lump us in with the rest of that crazy shit. All right.
Yes.
Homosexuality is a natural thing. It happens in other species of animals. There are, I don't know if it's nature's birth control or God's way of keeping an edge on things or whatever, however you might want to take it. As much as I personally, by the way, what I always tell my gay friends, my gay male friends, I said, the reason that straight men like lesbian porn, but we hate, gay porn is that, it's the yuck factor. I mean, the whole thing is yuck. I mean, to a straight man, the idea of taking it up the poop chute from another man is yuck. I mean, I'm sorry, but there's, whenever I meet a gay couple, I can't help but think to myself, these guys are taking it up the poop chute with each other, and who's on top? But it doesn't bother me because they're doing that in their own fucking bedroom, and as long as they don't share it with me in some graphic detail, then I'm cool with it. Now, I have to be honest with you, I opposed the Birkenfeld decision that made gay marriage legal. I think I said that right. Throughout the entire country, the Supreme Court decision where gay marriage. Now, I don't think marriage should be. I don't think gay couples should fall under the traditional institution of marriage, only because of once you start breaking down each boundary to what a traditional marriage is, it turns into what it's turned into, which is a giant clusterfuck of meaningless relationships and unhappy men and women. But before I get into that, I think that I think we actually had the right solution back under President Clinton, which was civil union. I mean, you can get married. I mean, not get married. You can declare for each other. You can be in a monogamous relationship. You can get each other's health insurance through work. You can, put together your retirement plans. Use the AB trust in structure it in an estate to leave your partner, the other part of your estate. Yada yada yada. You can do all those things, but it's not a marriage. Yeah, and the reason, and it can't be, just because it destroys the very foundation. You're fucking around with something you don't understand, or that we don't understand. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. And if you don't understand what the trade-offs are when you do something, you shouldn't do it. Which is, this is really getting deep. But as I was formulating the 1964 plan, a lot of what I thought about was Taoism. And the central Taoism was founded by a guy named Lao Tzu about 600 years before Christ. And it's a religion and a philosophy, and the two things are separated. So I'm not a religious Taoist, but philosophically, the central concept of Taoism is it's better to do nothing than to be busy doing nothing. Okay, so in other words, well, that's really what it comes down to. So if you're faced with a dilemma, right? If you're faced with a problem and you think you want to solve it, you probably should just leave it the fuck alone. It'll solve itself. Okay, so I'll use a very classic example, and this is going to make me no friends, but here we go. And this has nothing, Civil War, okay, and slavery, which became a poster child for the Civil War. Now, I don't want to get into it, what the Civil War was really fought about, because it really wasn't fought about slavery. Slavery was the poster child for what it was fought about. But what would have happened, okay, if the South would have been allowed to secede, which was their right under the Constitution? They had absolutely every right to do it. I'm sorry. Again, I'm not defending slavery as an institution. I'm speaking strictly in the context of that time, what they were thinking about. It was not so much about slavery as don't tell us what the fuck to do. Okay, that's what it really came right down to. And we're tired of being, told what to do from a central point of view. And so we're going to secede. And so they seceded. And then Lincoln is who made slavery a central issue. Now, you have to understand that Lincoln himself was a politician like any other. Yep. And there are tons and tons. And how did I get into Lincoln from the traditional nuclear family? Where the fuck am I going? So anyway, Lincoln, I'll stay with it because I'm here. So Lincoln, to the day that bullet went through his brain, his concept all along was to expatriate the slaves to Africa. He felt that the two races could never mix. And it was if he had lived and he had not been assassinated, his idea of Reconstruction would have been to round up the slaves, put them on ships, and send them back to Africa. I'm sorry, that's the truth of it. It's not that he saw that blacks were inferior or not human beings. He thought they were human beings, but a different species of human beings. And you have to understand that until we understood DNA, which wasn't until the 20th century, we had no idea that we were all related. So when you look at, it had nothing to do with race so much as we all looked at ourselves like different breeds of dog. Okay, and a dog doesn't understand. My Airedale Terrier, who ran into a German Shepherd puppy this morning when we were out at the park, the two of them played together, but they had no idea they were both dogs. I mean, it's just one's a German Shepherd and one's a Terrier. The history of Native Americans. I'm reading a very interesting book right now, by the way, called Empire of the Summer Moon, and it's the story of the last Comanche chief. His name was Quanah Parker, and his mother was a white woman who was kidnapped by the Comanches during a raid in 1830 on the Texas frontier, and then chose to remain with the Comanches. Became so much a part of their culture that although she had an opportunity to leave many times, she never took it. She stayed, and then she married a Comanche warrior and chief. And everything you think you know about Indians, by the way, you don't. And when you start to read about what was really going on, so the Comanches actually were an empire, and they controlled all of northern Mexico up through the Great Plains, up through the north. And what they did for a living, and the reason they were able to do this is that they were the ones who got, when every other tribe got horses from the Spaniards. Look I'm in the Comanches and Spaniards, and we started out in traditional. Do you want me to keep going on this?
Yeah.
You want me to keep? I mean, I'm just a fountain of useless information, and I promise I'll bring it around. It's not useless. I'll bring it around. But this is why, by the way, American education just sucks.
Yeah, I agree.
Sucks. None of this stuff is like, this is stuff people should know, and you shouldn't learn about cowboys and Indians from Western movies. Okay, nor should you think that you have a better view of it by watching like Dances with Wolves. Now, I love Dances with Wolves, Manite Taco Wihalo Obuashie. That's my one sentence in Sioux. But here's the thing. Sioux were getting slaughtered by the Pawnee, like in that movie, but they were slaughtering the Pawnee right back. I mean, this is what these indigenous people do. You have to understand that the entirety of Native Americans we're never going to be able to stand up to either the Spaniards or us. They were just lucky it was us and not the Spaniards that dominated. And by the way, that was the choice, not between you get to live free on the plains. It was, were the Spaniards going to overrun them, or were we going to overrun them, or both? Because these people had not invented the wheel. They were 5,000 years behind European culture. Wow. Okay, the question was only which European culture was going to roll over. Okay, that's it. They never had a chance from square one. Now, they didn't have the wheel. These people did not know how to practice agriculture. They had no fucking chance. They were going to be, and if it wasn't us, it was going to be another tribe. So the Comanches were an empire. They were a decentralized empire. There was no such thing as a big chief. That's why we kept, by the way, fucking up negotiations. It took us a long time to figure out that when you made a peace treaty with this chief, it had nothing to do with that chief. There was no big chief of the Comanches. You could make a deal, and that chief could keep that deal, but it had nothing to do with all the other bands. It was more important to which band. But in the Comanche Empire, all the bands cooperated with each other, and when necessary, would come together. And what made them so deadly was they mastered the horse. And where all the other tribes where I know in the movies it looks like, the Indians are attacking and they're all on horseback. The only Indian tribe that attacked on horseback were the Comanches. All the rest would do what we used to do until we figured out horseback warfare, which was dismount and go into the battle on foot, leaving your horses behind. But the Comanches learned how to, and they were the greatest horsemen besides the Mongols. Perhaps only the Mongols were as good as the Comanches. But the problem is that when you spend a lot of time on horseback, this is really obscure, but it kills your fertility. So the Comanches could not replace themselves. So the reason they would raid and capture white captives and also captives from other tribes was because their women weren't getting impregnated at a rate fast enough to replace and maintain the tribe's population because of how much time the men spent in horseback getting their balls beat up. I mean, there's no other way to look. That happens to be true. So, and I don't know why I went here, just to point out that in the span of history, everything's connected. And before you do anything, you need to think to yourself, would it fix itself? So back to slavery for a moment, which is why I get on this. I don't know why I went to. By the way, the Comanches owned over 30,000 black slaves. Just like to point that out. In fact, there was an entire Comanche army that fought for the South. And in fact, they were the last Southern army to surrender. I don't know if anyone really understands that. Native Americans here's an interesting statistic. In the South, there were about 30 to 40,000 freed slaves that over the years, various owners had given their freedom when they died or rewarded them, and but they remained in the South. And here's the best part. 10,000 of them owned their own black slaves. That's a historic fact. Slavery in the context of the time was not a racial issue. I'm sorry, it just wasn't. It was every single black person in this country has been sold in slavery by another black person. Okay, so let's come back to, and that's a fact because of malaria. White people couldn't go into the African continent because malaria killed them in less than 9 months. And until 1858, we didn't even know what sulfur was to treat malaria, so it was an automatic death sentence. So anyway, the average life expectancy of a white man in Africa prior to 1858 was 9 months. And the reason that slaving ended. Slavery ended in this country in 1865, ultimately, but slaving, in other words, bringing Africans from Africa to the United States, ended in 1838. And the reason it ended in 1838 was the death rate above deck was as high as the death rate below deck. So while, yes, those people were all packed together horribly in the hold of those ships and dying from all kinds of shit, the guys on the deck were dying at the same rate from malaria because they had absolutely nothing to defend themselves against with these African slaves. And so it became obvious not to bring any more African slaves. They didn't understand what caused malaria. They just knew that it was killing everybody. It was coming from Africa. They figured that out colloquially, the same way the ancient Jews figured out not to eat pork, and they didn't understand what trichinosis was. You can figure things out colloquially if you're smart, observationally. And so back to what was I talking about? What did I go into? Why did I go to Lincoln and relativism? I said so, and then I went away. What did I? So flash forwarding to today, we have just fucked the whole thing up. Let's just come back to today. We have just fucked the whole traditional nuclear family up. And if we don't repair it, there's nothing else that matters. It doesn't matter what our foreign policy is. It doesn't matter what party's in power. It doesn't matter. And nothing matters. If we lose the traditional nuclear family, which we are, 52% of babies today of all races across the board are born into single parent families. If we continue this trend, we're done.
I want to jump in here because when I was doing my opening, I went to your website, and then I got to that nuclear family part, and I thought, okay, I wonder what his definition of this means, because I'm not traditionalist as far as
it's a man and a woman who gets married,
or even that part, or woman's at home at 5 o'clock making dinner and all that. Like,
no, that just
hold on.
Back in the kitchen.
I really love your answer because it makes sense, and even as far as like homosexuality and the LGBT community, I don't support anything that has a well-funded agenda behind it. But that said, I theoretically could be a part of that community, but I'm not, because I don't like those groups, and I don't like agendas, and I don't like the way that it's been perverted and bastardized and forced in people's faces, because there's an agenda there, like the over-sexualization of children, drag queen story hour, all of that stuff.
A drag queen and a gay man are two completely different things. I don't know that the general public understands that. And lumping them all together isn't fair.
But they don't understand it. That's why your answer, I am so grateful for your answer. And what you said, I want to make this part clear. What you said about sexuality being straight over here, gay over here, 100% gay, 100% straight, and there's this sliding spectrum, I 1000% agree with what you said about that, because that is why I don't want to label what I am, because it doesn't need to be labeled. It's beautiful the way you describe it to me.
I have had a homosexual experience, not sexual, but being attracted to another man in my life. I'm not going to lie about it. There have been men in my life, not a lot. I remember the first time I experienced it, I was in junior high school, and it was an Italian kid named Rocky something. And for some reason, I found him attractive. I don't know what else. I didn't act on it. He didn't act on it. We never talked about it. It never came up. But it was, I don't know. I never gave it any thought until everyone made a goddamn issue out of it. I mean, having a passing attraction, and then you kind of fall on whatever side of the line makes you comfortable. And some people, bisexuality is real, homosexuality is real, heterosexuality is real, and the rest of it's bullshit. And as far as if I were lesbian or gay, being lumped in with transsexual, transvestites, let's call them what they really were and are prior to this modernization. Transvestism is a sexual fetish. Now, it has a lot to do with body dysmorphia. It has a lot to do with confusion. There are genuinely transsexual people in the sense that, but they're a very small percentage, and they're almost always men. Historically, the reason that, by the way, whenever I get into a debate with some nutcase who believes this is true, I always say, where are all the old transvestites? In other words, when transsexuals, when I was a kid, and you're not as old as I am, gay people really did have to live in the closet. It was not a good time to be gay in America. No. And all of us knew growing up, I knew gay men and women, everyone, your spinster teacher, my algebra teacher in junior high school, Miss Hutchison, who lived with her friend on a farm, now we kind of figured it out even then, but just the thing was, it was like, don't ask, don't tell was the whole society. It was just no one gave a shit. Now, once homosexuality came out of the closet once and for all, which was a good thing, and plenty of other cultures in history have, but I mean, I hate to tell you, the Romans were much more healthy sexually than we were. I mean, they understood that. I mean, Caesar would sleep with a boy as much as he would sleep with a girl. I mean, that's absolutely historical fact. Go ahead and look it up. And no one thought anything of it. It was just a completely, I don't know, maybe a more healthy way of looking at things, but still they had a nuclear family. And still, I mean, there are reasons for certain structures within the culture. But anyway, back to trend. So when gay became acceptable in this country, almost every gay person I knew came out of the closet and said, "Oh, thank God," and that was the end of it. And now I just don't think anyone. There are holdouts, but most people really don't give a shit, not at all. And so if that's the case, and all of these closeted gays and lesbians came out, where are the closeted transsexuals now that that's acceptable? Where are all the 40 and 50 and 60 and 70-year-old transgenders that supposedly have existed because they came into the wrong body? Where are they? And the answer is they don't exist. And the reason they don't exist is this is all bullshit. This is also a product of a breakdown of the nuclear family, because if you watch these devouring mothers, and I'm using the definition of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, both who they competed with each other, but they both agreed on this. This is what a devouring mother is a mother who lives her life through her children to the detriment of the children. Another term for that is Munchausen's by proxy, because they love to get attention, and we have a national epidemic of Munchausen's by proxy, and it's being supported by the popular culture. But the thing is, it never existed before, because where are the old transgenders? It virtually never existed among girls. So it's really, when it does exist, and it's a tiny fraction of 1%, it's 1 in 100,000 people, by the way, statistically, okay, that are genuinely gender confused. First of all, their life there's nothing to be done for them in the end. Digressing slightly, my best friend and oldest friend is a urologist in Philadelphia. And so he's done a lot of gender reassignment surgeries over the years. He just retired. And we've talked about this. And he said, I mean, this could be a little graphic, but when a man decides that he's a woman, he's this 1 in 100,000 people who have true gender confusion, and he elects for the surgery, and he's been counseled. And the way that it used to work is you get counseled, don't do this. But if they would insist on doing it, what Milty, my friend's name is Milty told me that the vagina that they produce, the replica, is pretty realistic. In other words, when they save enough of the stimulant, of the head of the penis, she said it's actually, obviously it doesn't self-lubricate. Obviously you're not going to have a period. Obviously there's no womb, but it does look and operate generally like a vagina. But here's what I didn't know. When they build an artificial penis, which if you've ever seen a photograph of what that looks like, it is not attractive. It is awful. It's awful. Number one is it can't get hard what they do is they take one ball and they put a fluid in it, a hydraulic fluid, and the ball, they take out one testicle and they put in this artificial testicle that's got this fluid and a one-way valve and a release of how you release it. And you basically pump up your fake penis with this I'm not making this up, so that you can achieve penetration on a woman who would be weird enough to let you do it. And, but there's no pleasure in it for you at all. And it's just a mechanical act, and you're not going to ejaculate or achieve orgasm. So
what's the effing point?
What's that?
What's the effing point?
The suicide rate among transitional surgeries traditionally is over 50%. What they find out is that after they have their penis cut off, they find out they're no happier than they were before. And they end up becoming deeply depressed and killing themselves. Now, this suicide rate has accelerated since we've started to include women into this, because this is not reversible. Okay, this bullshit that you can pump a pre-adolescent full of either testosterone or estrogen, like there's some kind of machine, and you can just turn off puberty and turn it back on when you feel like it. There's not going to be a consequence. You've got to be stupid. You need to be a doctor to understand this, even the sheer stupidity of that. Okay. Now, the suicide rate among boys has remained more or less flat all of this time. But the suicide rate among girls starting in 2014, it looks like a hockey stick. It goes like this. And that's because, and this is never spoken to, most of the girls who fall into this trap of going with what their single stupid mothers say are there's no other way to put this, the fat and unattractive girls mostly. So I don't know any other way to put this. The pretty girls don't do this. It's always the fat, unattractive outsiders 99 times out of 100. I know someone's going to write a comment on the bottom of this saying, but my daughter's beautiful and she's a boy and all that shit. Okay, there's an exception to everything, but by and large, it is, when you consider it's 1 in 100,000 people traditionally, that, for example, I know personally, one of my friends has 2 granddaughters who both have said they're boys. That's impossible. That is statistically impossible to have 2 children in the same family having the same gender dysphoria. That's impossible statistically. Can't happen. And yet it happens all the time. That you would have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or a nest of transgenders in the same high school or junior high school is statistically impossible.
It's programming, right? It's the programming through our...
Now, had those families been traditional nuclear families, and had there been a father involved, he would have put his foot down and said, no fucking way. He would have immediately filed for divorce, because that would be grounds. He would have gotten rid of that crazy bitch and had custody of those children on his own, got a restraining order, and kept her away from those children forever, which is bad, but it would be worse to turn loose this mentally ill Munchausen by proxy nutcase on her own children. Sometimes the alternatives are both bad, but one's worse than the other. So what we've done this is just another one more byproduct of the breakdown of the traditional nuclear family. This has never happened before in history because no father would have ever tolerated it. Now, again, I know someone's going to write and say, I'm a father, and you're a pussy. You're a lunatic pussy if you're a father. I'm sorry. There are lunatic pussies out there, and this is not a gender judgment. I know plenty of manly gays and pussy heterosexuals. I'm just saying that the father is a pussy, and that's too bad for the kids. They lost the lottery of fathers. But most fathers would drag their kids out of there and restrain their ex-wives, get rid of them, lock them up, do whatever they had to do. These women are just plain dangerous. And I don't pull a punch on this. But anyway.
I appreciate your candor, because I haven't had to, I have friends that are drag queens that speak out against these agendas, and it's, I hearing from their perspective has always been very enlightening to me. Hearing what you're saying is also like, it's their hard truths, but I believe that you're speaking the truth. And I'm not a conservative. I'm not really liberal either. I'm just kind of a common sense guy. And to me, you're saying common sense. And
as you know, I don't endorse any party. Democrat, Republican, I don't care. As you know, I'm apolitical. I don't care.
Yeah, I'm apolitical too. So we
truth is, see, I think that politicians are generally, and this is the term I used on the websites, and I love this term. And by the way, I stole this term from Carl Hyacin, who's an author who writes really funny books. He's a reporter for the have you read Carl Hyacin?
Yes, of course. He's amazing.
Okay.
Him and Tim Dorsey are my 2 favorite authors.
Okay, so I never plagiarize. I always give credit. He says in one of his books, this is a book about when Skink, the governor who walked away and has one eye and lives in the Everglades, that character, which is a great character. If you guys haven't read Carl Hyacin, you are missing a true joy in life. So in this particular book, Skink, who's the next governor of Florida, calls politicians obsequious, glad-handing weasels, conniving shit weasels. Let me see, something about maggots. Anyway, so I use those terms because that's how I view them. They're obsequious, glad-handing shit weasels. Okay? And conniving doesn't begin. They will fall in line with whatever suits their pursuit of power, which I can go into that for hours. So I'm apolitical. And The 1964 plan is a nonprofit, but it's a 501c3, not a 501c4. And the difference is when you donate to us, it's tax deductible versus a C4 where it's not, because C4s are political action committees, basically. Those are the super PACs and things like that. We're strictly educational. I'm here to discuss the plan and anything else you want to talk about. But as far as who you want to vote for, I don't give a shit because they're all the same. It's a uniparty in my view. And one of the biggest questions I get is, gee, this is a great plan. When we get into it, I'm happy to discuss the parts of it. But, a lot of guys will say skeptically and understandably, this will never happen. And I always concede, you're right, it won't happen now. But when the radical becomes reasonable, when the shit hits the fan, and the shit is hitting the fan right now. And we're about to go, we're going to go into a global depression. And as you know, I have a strong background in finance. We're going to go into a global depression that's going to make the Great Depression seem like a happy memory. This is going to be a real shit show. And it's already begun. And it's all there. Don't ever underestimate the power of the general population to live in denial as long as humanly possible. And there's nothing to be done about it. At this point, when people ask me, when I say this, what can we do to prevent it? Nothing. It's already here. There's nothing to be done. What I'm talking about is what's going to come on the other side of that. Yeah. So there's got to be reasonable alternatives. Otherwise, we're going to get a Hitler. That's what happens. So when you have a total societal breakdown, you get a radical political alternative. Now, in the Great Depression, we got a very, very socialist president in FDR. And if you understand the Great Depression, it didn't have to be the Great Depression. FDR made it the Great Depression. So when people don't know about the forgotten depression of the 20th century. So there was another depression in the 20th century that no one ever knows about. And it was the 1920 depression. It lasted from 1920 to 21. It lasted 9 months because the president during that depression was Warren Harding. And by the way, the mainstream hates Warren Harding because he was a Taoist kind of president. So what did he do when the depression hit? He cut government spending dramatically. He did absolutely nothing to stimulate. He had absolutely no work plans. He greatly reduced the size of government and the tax burden generally. And understand that when he was president, the income tax existed, but was not much of anything. He suspended all of that. And the economy recovered 9 months all by itself because that's what a free market does. A depression happens when forces build up, usually by human intervention, that have to be cleaned out. And the only way through any problem is straight ahead. And that almost always involves an economic downturn. Now, we had another depression that took place in 1933. But the difference was Herbert Hoover at first, and then followed by FDR, who did nothing more than continue Hoover's policies on steroids. Both of them tried to use the power of the government to shorten the depression and ended up causing a Great Depression. If they would have left it the fuck alone, it would have been over in 1934. But instead, it didn't really end until 1945 after the Second World War, and all that pent-up demand basically dragged the country out of it, and Roosevelt was dead. And by that point, the country had had enough of that shit, and it elected a Republican Congress, which Truman called the Do-Nothing Congress, but in fact was the Congress that stopped Truman from instituting a European-style welfare state in the United States. And by doing that, we then had a run of presidents who didn't try that until we got to LBJ, and we had that golden period, which is where the name 1964 plan comes from. It was the end of the golden period, where we had next to no crime. The United States was at the top of its game. We were involved in no foreign wars. And we passed the Civil Rights Act, making all forms of discrimination illegal. We had the world by the ass, and we finally got rid of discrimination as a legal action. And all we had to do from that point forward was nothing. And of course we did, and we fucked it all up. And here we are.
Oh, Herbie, this is what I want you to do. I want you to close us out with this. I want you to share the plan, the 1964 plan, share how people can support it, why they should support it. The floor is yours to wrap us up with the 1964 plan.
Okay, so the 1964 plan is a detailed plan on how to restore the traditional nuclear family. And then at the same time, by through prison reform and the drug war, which I'll talk about in a minute, and national service, we can return the country to where we were in 1964, not in the sense that I want to put women in the kitchen or anything like that, but how we face the future in 1964, to once again be at the top of our game. And so whatever comes our way have the kind of foundation under us that we can weather whatever the future brings. I don't know what the future brings. You don't know what the future brings. Nobody knows what the future brings. But if you have a strong foundation, you can deal with whatever comes up. If you have no foundation, if it's all about me, then, well, we're going to end up right where we are. People don't understand. Rome never fell. It became a church. And the reason it became the Roman Catholic Church. And the reason it became the Roman Catholic Church, and in the East, the Eastern Orthodox Church, was because the traditional empire descended into degeneracy, and the then emperors at the time then selected religions. Constantine picked Christianity, and in the Eastern Orthodox Church, Christianity as well, but a different flavor of it, a different, a whole different view on the Virgin Mary. And anyway, I want to get into theology, but that's the difference between the two churches. Says the Jewish boy, like I know what I'm talking about. But because I actually do, I've actually realized this. But anyway,
me too. But and you're right. Keep going.
Okay, so, but we're not going to transition to a church. We're just going to go to nothing. I mean, what people don't understand is all of us are Christians, whether you're Jewish or a Muslim or not, if you live in the West, because the dominant theology of the West is Christianity. And Christianity is what makes the West better than everywhere else. I'm sorry, it's true. And at the center of that is the sanctity of the family. But it's also, and this is the most important part that people don't understand. As a Jew, you've heard the term that Jews consider ourselves the chosen people. Yeah. That doesn't mean we're chosen to be special by God, like the only ones that go to heaven, which I think is what a lot of people think that means. It meant that we were chosen to bring law to the rest of mankind. So when Moses walked down from Mount Sinai, whether you believe it's true or not, he carried with him the fundamental laws upon which all laws of the Western culture are built, okay? And that manifests as Christian thought. We call it Judeo-Christian thought because we're the religion of Christianity, and Jesus himself was a Jew. But really, truly, what Christianity it has that Judaism doesn't is a sense of afterlife, which makes you want to live your current life maybe a little better, because you might have to pay a price. Jews don't have Satan. Jews don't have heaven per se. I mean, we kind of, sort of, maybe kind of talk about it, but not really. It's not a big thing like it is in Christianity.
Right.
And the other thing that Christianity is about that Judaism doesn't have is about having a second chance. And what we've done in our culture is we've thrown that away somewhere along the way. So like when you look at this most recent shooting, so back to the plan and how, let me talk about the plan and then I'll get the practical effects of it. So first we have to solve the breakdown of the nuclear family. Now, the plan says there are three causes to the breakdown of the nuclear family: no-fault divorce, the birth control pill, and the welfare state. Now, I'm going to go through this fast because everything I'm about to say, you can go to the 1964plan.org website, and I've written a white paper on every part of these. So there's a lot of buttons that say learn more. Click on any one of those buttons. You'll go through to the white papers. And I wrote them, I footnote them so I don't just make up shit and I tell you where I get my stuff. But at the very same time, well, that's the difference between a white paper and bullshit, right? And there's also, I guarantee everybody who's watching, when you go to read the plan, there are going to be parts of it you absolutely hate. And I'm going to tell you, that's why it's a plan and not propaganda. I didn't write this to run for office. I have no political ambition at all. So when I wrote this, my whole thought in mind was to leave the culture better than I found it after I dropped dead, because I'm obviously in the last, quarter, I hope it's a third, but probably a quarter at best of my life. And that's okay. I'm okay with it. I'm not afraid of dying because so many people have done it before just fine. It's just like, I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to have to perform. But until that happens, I want to try to redeem myself because the fuck ups I've made along the way. And at the very same time, in fact, I wrote the 1964 plan in prison. So, and you'll all understand that when you go listen to the video and and how I came to that, all that kind of stuff. I don't get into my crime because the minute you do, it starts turning into weaseling. And you know what? I got what I deserved. I paid the price for it. End of story. If no one can forgive me for that, there's nothing I can do about it. And if you want to judge me by the worst thing I've ever done, then judge me by the worst thing I've ever done. But let's say you consider me an evil piece of shit, that doesn't preclude the fact that I might have written something brilliant. And that's what the 1964 plan is. I'm not asking for your vote. I'm just asking you to read the plan. Okay. Well, no, really, the truth, if I was running for office, you could disbelieve every word I'm saying, because obviously everything I'd be saying would be propaganda designed to get me elected. Yeah. But That's one of the reasons. By the way, I don't sit on the board of the 1964 Plan nonprofit. I'm not an officer of it, and I don't deal with any of the business. It's all done by other people. And I'm unaware of what goes on. And I did that on purpose for two reasons. One, I don't want to pollute what I say and by any kind of self-interest. And secondly, because of my background, when people donate, I don't want them to think I'm pocketing it. I don't even know what our balance is. I can honestly tell you, I don't know where we bank, to be honest. I am the creator and the front man, and I did that on purpose. I divorced myself from that so it would never become an issue. So anyway, back to the plan. Now, on no-fault divorce, the worst thing we ever did was make divorce easy, because by doing that, we converted marriage from a commitment into just another long-term relationship. So now you can walk into a court anywhere for any reason and say you're incompatible, and that's all you have to say, and you can get a divorce. And if your spouse opposes you, tough shit. You know, if one party wants a divorce, everybody's getting a divorce. And with no thought. Now, first of all, that fucks women, because prior to this, when no-fault divorce didn't exist, women got the better of it financially over 90% of the time. Because in those days, under traditional marriage, women weren't working outside the home. And by the way, the reason they weren't working outside the home traditionally is because most of the jobs held by men were jobs that women can't perform, like bricklayers and plumbers. You know, whenever they get into the traditional nuclear family and why is, you know, we want women, the radical feminists always talk about careers like STEM, you know, science, technology, engineering, math fields. Well, that's this much of the population that can even perform at that level. Everybody else is mostly working people. And working people, most working jobs are extremely physical. And extremely physical jobs are not done as well by women as men, nor do they want to. Do women really want to be high-rise construction workers? Do they really want to be plumbers? I mean, I don't know if you've ever been around professional plumbers, but they don't get paid enough, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, people are generally working with shit all day long. Now, how do you think want to take that job? Now, someone has to do it. If the shit doesn't move, we're all in trouble. If the society doesn't function very well. Okay, you know, it used to be, and like in London, ask a Briton what the term Gardaloo means. Gardaloo. Okay, what that means is before we had sanitation and plumbers and all that, they would open the windows on the top floor of the house, let's say, and they would just heave the night pot out the window, and before they would, they yell, and that's why they call it the loo, the pooper. And they just throw the shit right out the window into the street. And if you were dumb enough or unlucky enough to be under, you would get hit by the shit falling from the windows. I'm not making this up. Go ahead. Fact check me. Every Briton, if you know anyone British or Scottish, which is the same thing, Great Britain, English or Scottish, and under the Great Britain thing, they'll know what Gardaloo means. Okay? It still persists to this day. So women aren't going to do those jobs. So how do you solve the no-fault divorce issue? It's simple, by getting government out of the marriage business altogether. So marriage should be, if you're religious, obviously be a function of your church, and the government does not need to tell churches or synagogues or mosques how to get people married, or temples or whatever it might be. Whatever, if you're religious, regardless of your religion, obviously you're religious. I don't want to say just church, because there's so many religions, but your religious institution can sanction marriage. And the other part of that is, if you're not religious, then just let an attorney draw a contract, because that's what it is. You don't need to go down to the courthouse and get the permission of the state to get married. I don't understand how we got the state. Why are we licensing marriage? And then what they do is fuck everything up. Instead, let the people who aren't religious negotiate what the marriage contract is. And I got news for you, that no lawyer is going to represent the client, male or female, without getting them the best deal possible. Even a bad lawyer knows that. So they're going to negotiate a deal that's hard to get out of, which is very, very important, because it should be harder to get out of marriage than to break a business partnership. And today it's much, much easier. And that's because when you get married, let me say this, prior to having children, get divorced. I don't give a shit. If you don't have children and you want to make your life unhappy and not have children, knock yourself out. As the father of four, I'm telling you, children are a blessing. They are. They're also a giant pain in your ass, but it's all harder.
Amen to that. Okay.
Too. And when you become married, it's not about you anymore. And that's a Christian value and a Jewish value and a Hindu value and a Muslim value and a Buddhist value and a Taoist value and a Shintoist value and an animist value that is universal in mankind. We are here. If you people, what is the meaning of my life? I'll tell you right now, it's to replace yourself. Okay, that's what the meaning of your life is. Now, it's to replace yourself and have a little fun. Okay, so that's why, by the way, human beings are the only species of animal that doesn't die at the end of our fertility. We have somehow beaten that, we used to die at the end of our fertility. The reason the average man and woman would die in their 40s is that's about when women go into menopause and men don't have a sperm count high enough to make babies anymore. That's why you can't make your dog live longer than it's going to live. That's why you can't make a horse live longer than it's going to live. Because once it is no longer fertile, then nature has no use for it, and it dies. This is why the salmon die in the streams, in a dramatic example. Okay, we are the only species who have figured out through technology how to extend our lifespan past the point of fertility. So, I mean, theoretically, I could knock up a girl now, but it would almost be the second coming of Jesus Christ. It would be a miraculous impregnation, and would have to be with a girl inappropriately too young. Women my age are no longer capable of having babies. So the point of that is we have kind of, because of longevity, fucked up what we think marriage and life is about. But what it's always been about, and what it's still really about, is replacing yourself, at least with someone as good as you were, and hopefully better. But we've done exactly the opposite. So the first thing I would do is take the government out of the marriage business. And once it becomes a contract or a religious, if you're devout, for example, for a Jew, for an observant Jew, you can't just divorce. You have to get a get. And a get, which comes from a rabbinical council, is very hard to get because they understand, not because they're some two-dimensional, evil, chauvinistic pricks from, like depicted in some movies, but because they understand it's about the children, not you. It's about the children, not you. And we've talked ourselves into believing things like, for example, it's better for the kids if we get divorced because we're always arguing. No, I'm sorry. Exposing your kids to an argument is not abuse of your children. It's showing them what happens in life and how to deal with those things. And you're teaching, they're not going to go through their life without having an argument with whoever they end up with. I'm sorry. They're not going to go through their life without experiencing all kinds of bullying and shit. We have protected our children into decadence is what we've done. Okay, I mean, people like bullying is another good example. Bullies do a service. You're going to run into bullies your whole life. If you don't learn to deal with them as a child, you're not going to have a fucking shit. You're going to end up being some little pussy as an adult. You're going to get beaten on your whole life. You're going to always be the victim and never the victor. But okay, let's continue with the plan. So that's how we solve the no-fault divorce. We just get the government out of it, let it become either a non-secular contract or a non-secular binding religious belief or a secular contract. Either way, it'll be almost impossible to get out of it, as it should. Except for chronic domestic violence and out of control addiction, I don't see any other reason for divorce. And by the way, 80%, I don't know if I told you this before, Josh, but 80% of domestic violence arrests are women. 80% of domestic violence is done by women on men. Because, again, no radical feminist ever says this, but men generally don't hit women under any circumstance because we understand that we could kill them. Even if we're bad enough to hit them, we refrain from it because we don't want to hurt them. Whereas a woman can beat on a man till hell freezes over and generally not hurt him unless he picks up a broom, which is another story. And that's why they get arrested. By the way, here's a trivia question for you, Josh. What percentage of domestic violence involves alcohol?
Oh, shit. 90%?
100%. 100%. It's always alcohol. It's always alcohol. Because even a pig, let's say that the movie version of a wife beater exists, and they do, really bad men. These men, even they try to control it, but they get a couple of drinks in them, they go ape shit. We've all met mean drunks, guys that are okay on the outside, but the next you get a couple of drinks in them, they turn into just mean motherfuckers. That's, by the way, why every other drug is better than alcohol, because none of them make you into a mean fucker. I mean, I can say, when I was in prison, the junkies were the greatest guys to be around because all they did was sleep. They didn't bother anybody. They laid in their racks and they were just minding their own fucking business, and they were high as kites, and God bless them, And The meth heads never got violent. All they did was pick their eyebrows till they were gone. But that's another story. I have so many stories. Story. They would be up all night, like I could go on and on. I know.
I don't need to be reminded of that life. Ah!
Oh my God, the tweakers. There was a joke in prison that, like, how do you find the tweaker? In any city, you go to Walmart at 2:00 in the morning. He's the guy in aisle 5 with the cart turned upside down, trying to fix the wheels. That's the tweaker. They never sleep. They're constant. All they're doing is playing with shit and fucking, and that's what tweakers do. So anyway, we've solved it. I mean, not solved, but that's step 1 on helping the nuclear families, getting rid of no-fault divorce. Step 2, the thing that caused the breakdown of the nuclear family, second cause, is the birth control pill. The birth control pill didn't exist in the United States until 1961. Prior to 1961, most people got married as virgins. Now, without getting graphic, I know as soon as I say that, everyone's going to think about when they were in high school and all the things they did that were sex. There's all kinds of sexual things that we've been doing for centuries without actually, oral sex, digital manipulation. I mean, kids have been doing that forever. But see, the bottom line is no one was getting pregnant. Okay. And women knew that it would fall on them worse if they got pregnant before marriage. So girls married as virgins, they might have given their boyfriend 100 blowjobs. Now we're getting into what is sex, the Clinton thing. But yes, that's sex, but it's not. You can't get pregnant from a blowjob. I'm sorry. I don't know any other way to put that. So, I mean, I wish I could dress that up, but I'm just talking like a normal person, not a politician. So we're not going to get rid of the birth control pill, but we're going to, and the reason that's bad, by the way, and the reason we have so many unhappy women is because when women became like men and could fuck anyone they want without worrying about getting knocked up, then the issue of sexual comparison came in where it never existed before. So what that did is it started to create in women's mind the possibility of a man that doesn't exist. So they would, along the way, like have great sex. And that's usually a bastard kind of guy, because that's the guy who's going to be the best in bed, is the most alpha male. But they realize they don't really want that guy. They think to themselves, they keep looking for this combination of man who stares at the stars and knows how to fuck great, and they just don't exist. So they end up waiting a long time as they get to be plus society is telling them, you don't have to have kids right away. Put it off. So now they get off to 28, 29, 30 years old. Their baby clocks are going off, and all the good men are taken because there's still smart enough women out there that snatched up all the good ones young. The reason that you have lust as a teenager is God's way of getting you to get married young when you're in your prime reproductive years. Your reproductive peak is 18 to 21. The reason that you're screaming with sexuality at that age is that's God telling you, get married. Lust and love is not discernible until you've been married for a while. It just isn't. The story of love at first sight is unbelievable. Lust at first sight, which is great. I love lust as much as the next person. But when you introduce sexual comparison, in the old days when people got married as virgins, when all they'd ever done is basically give each other hand jobs and oral sex, then when they finally had sex, it was like pizza. It was good. All pizza is good, unless you've had Brooklyn. But like in the Midwest, there's a chain called Casey's Pizza. I mean, Casey's, they're like a 7-Eleven or a Circle K. Weirdly enough, they make great pizza until you've had Brooklyn pizza, is the point I'm going to make. In other words, it's really good for Iowa pizza. But if you go to have Brooklyn pizza, you're not going to think it's that good. Well, that's how sex is now. If two virgins get married in Iowa, and the only person they've ever actually fucked is each other, they have a much better chance of staying together because they would work on their sex life because they don't know anything else really exists.
There's truth in that.
But when you have, why do you think Viagra? Why do you think Hims on TV, HIMS, that company, is selling generic Viagra by the truckload? It's because every man out there knows he's being sexually compared while he's having sex, so he cheats. Because I can tell you that I've used it, and I'm going to tell you right now, when you use Viagra and you're a perfectly healthy man, the result is you get a hard-on that a cat couldn't scratch. It's like glass. It's not so much that you get one; it's that it's hard as a rock. And this is how men now think they have to be in order to be attractive to women. And women have this unrealistic expectation because they're getting fucked by men on Viagra. So they're getting these the whole thing is such an unhealthy thing. Okay. I'm not saying there isn't a place for a Viagra. At my age, yeah. I mean, I don't really date anyone at this moment, but I'm not close to the concept. But women my age are not particularly sexually arousing to me. So in order for me to have sex with a woman that's appropriate for my age, I have to use Viagra. That's the truth of it. I'm not really attracted to women my own age very much. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Any more than they, by the way, to be fair, I look like an old man with my clothes off too. I mean, you know, there comes a certain reality, you know. If I was, you know, richer than God, I suppose. Anyway, I knew the kid. Okay, so
I appreciate what you're saying. I've got like let's this is all so fascinating. Let's like get through
so
this.
Let me steam through it. Okay. Step 3. So I covered the birth control. We're not going to get rid of. We're going to have to take care of that by teaching chastity. Now, the third thing is the welfare state. Now, I don't advocate the end of the welfare state. What I advocate is devolving it to the states. And the reason I advocate doing that is that the welfare state has fucked up the family because it incentivizes women to have children without husbands. That's what AFDC is. What we call welfare is aid to family with dependent children. And it pays you to have, you only get money if you have your child out of wedlock. And if for every child you have more children. So you might as well have hung out to move out of your house and get your own money signed to young girls all across America. And it's the single largest contributing factor, more than the other two, to the breakdown of the nuclear family, particularly in lower end of the culture, the poor people. So it falls most heavily on the Black community. Now, in order but on the other hand, we're compassionate people. We're Judeo-Christian, whatever you want to call it. And we believe that, you know, there are people that need help. And I agree with that. So where in the world is there a successful welfare state? And the answer to that is Sweden, Norway, Denmark. Now, why are they successful? They're not socialists, by the way. That's a Bernie fact. They all abandoned socialism in 1980 and 81 because socialism doesn't work. In other words, state owning enterprises and regulating prices and all that kind of shit. All of those countries have freer economies than we do. What they have are welfare states. And the reason it works in those countries is because they have very small populations. So, for example, the largest Scandinavian country by population is Sweden. And Sweden's population is about 10 million, which makes it smaller than greater New York City or greater Los Angeles by itself. That's number one. It's a lot easier to administer a plan with 10 million people than 340 million people. And the other difference between Sweden and us is that they are racially homogeneous. They're all Swedes. Now, there are a few Muslims and everything, Jews living there, but very few. As a percentage of the population, 98% Swedish, you know, white people. Now, that doesn't make them better or worse. It just means that when you design the program, you can design it custom for the population because you understand how they're going to react to certain stimulus and certain incentives because everyone thinks the same way. That's not going to work in the United States when you have Black people, white people, Asian people, all kinds of different flavors of Asian people. Japanese hate the Koreans hate the Japanese, they both hate the Chinese hate both of them. It goes on and on. Okay, you can't lump people together by color or race. We have a million different breakdowns, religious breakdowns. Catholics look at the world differently than Lutherans do. Everyone in Sweden is a Lutheran. Okay, in our country, we're 30% Roman Catholic. That's another division. We have a million of these things. So instead, if we devolve the welfare state from the federal government, shut the whole fucking thing down, all the HUD, HHS, Department of Labor, everything but basically defense, state, the Attorney General, and the Treasury. Everything else can get shut down and move it to the states. By doing that, you get two things. Number one is every state is essentially a country. We're basically 50 countries with open borders. That's what we are. Most of our states are the same size or bigger than most European countries. Like Texas would be the biggest country in Europe. California would be the biggest country in Europe. Alaska would be the biggest country in Europe, okay, by landmass. And they're all demographically different. So let the governor of Wyoming design his welfare plan or her welfare plan for their state, which is going to be very different than the governor of Florida, the governor of California, New York, Illinois, Texas. They all have unique demographics to that state. You're going to get a much, much better plan when you can design it and administer it, closer to your customers, okay? Because when your customer lives in your neighborhood, you have an incentive to do better than if you live in Washington, D.C. So, in other words, here in Arizona, the governor of this state is a woman named Katie Hobbs. She lives about 1.5 miles from me. If I wanted to, I could go over to where she lives and show up on her front door. Now, because I don't want to, I'm not going to, she's fine. But the point is, that alone makes you much more answerable to the people that you're serving than if you're a congressman and burying it in 5,000 pages of a continuing resolution that nobody the fuck understands. Okay, so and by devolving it to the states, a lot of these negative incentives will go away because no state would be stupid enough to design a plan that says leave your husband, basically. Don't get married, plop out babies. Right away, that has to go away. But leave the states to do it. And the reason that I know they'll do it is because states can't print money. So they can't do what the federal government is doing, which is run up $33 trillion in debt, which is immoral. And it's immoral because we're borrowing from the future to pay for the present. And it's not like we're building a national highway system like Eisenhower did. He borrowed money from the future because he knew that all of us benefit from the interstate highway system that the government built. So borrowing money to do that is perfectly legitimate. But to borrow money to pay current benefits and make people pay it off down the road who are never going to collect those benefits, it's not only stupid, it's immoral. Well, the state can't do that because the state can't print money. There's no such thing as a Federal Reserve in a state. So it will just automatically take care of itself. We don't have to get into the weeds of what every state's going to look like. Let the governor and the legislature and the mayors and the local population design their own plans as much as and here's the other thing that people don't understand about Scandinavia. Last point, and then I'm going to move on to the next part of the plan. Am I going way too long, Josh? I can see by the look in your face, I'm just going way too fucking long.
I've had to use the bathroom for like 40 minutes. So I'm very uncomfortable right now just because I have to use the bathroom. So why don't you keep talking? I'll be right back. I can hear you. So
that is too funky. Okay, go ahead, my friend. So anyway, I love that. By the way, at my age, I'll probably have to go in about 10 seconds. That's why I can't be a stand-up comedian. I could never last more than 5 seconds without having to go to the bathroom. Anyway, where was I? So what I'm saying is we don't have to really fuck with it. And in Scandinavia, they pay for their welfare state. So here in America, for example, the bottom half of wage earners in this country pay zero income tax at all. You know, when they say we're taxpayers, that's bullshit. No, they're not. If you're in the lower 50%, you pay zero tax. Well, in Scandinavia, everybody pays tax, and the tax rate begins at 56%. No deductions, 56%. Now, why do people agree to pay 56% of their income right off the top at every level to taxes? And on top of that, they have a 25% value added tax, which is basically a sales tax. So everything they buy costs 25% more than everything you buy. And why do they accept that? Because they're getting value. Because they have an excellent healthcare system. They have an excellent retirement system. They have an excellent educational system. They have excellent infrastructure. They're willing to pay for all of that out of their pockets currently because they're getting value for their money. But American welfare recipients have no concept of value for money. And that's why it all has to be devolved to the states and let them redesign plans, and they'll work and life will go on. And that will help restore the nuclear family. Now, let's move on to how are we going to pay for a lot of the stuff I'm about to propose. And so I want to move on to the drug war. And I advocate the absolute end of the drug war, that all drugs of all types should be legal, not decriminalized, legal. Now, again, I'm going to go over this fast. In the white paper, when I was in prison, I got to know the cartel guys really, really, really well. And I learned all about the drug. I'm glad you're back. Now I'm not just talking to a chair.
Oh, I heard every bit of it. I'm glad we segued to this subject. I love this one.
Okay, so when I was in prison breaks down, the inmates separate themselves racially, and it has nothing to do with the administration. So the white guys are the Woods, which is short for Pecker Woods. The black guys are the kinfolk. The Mexican Americans, Latino Americans are the Chicanos. The foreign national Latinos are the Paisas. Paisa means country in Spanish, by the way. That's where that comes from. And then the Native American are the Chiefs. And Asians and stuff don't have any groups because there's too few of them. Jews as well, too few. So when you get to each group, the group that brings in the drug, and I'll use the example of the Kingman prison yard that I was in. It was one of the prisons that I was in. In Kingman prison, I got to know the cartel guys really well. So I can tell you for a fact they were doing about $3.5 million a year in drug sales inside the prison. And that wasn't coming in up someone's ass or vagina when they came in for visitation, like in the movies. Where that was coming in was from corrupt corrections officers. Now, they weren't all corrupt, so obviously they too occasionally got randomly screened when they would walk into the prison. So how they got around that was drones. So the cartel would fly a drone into the corner of the yard when the prison was locked down, and then one of the corrupt guards would pick it up and take it to the places, who would then distribute it among the other races. And then there was a barter system that you could transfer. I won't go in, I could get lost in the weeds of this, but there was a way to pay cash for your drugs, even though there was no cash in prison, using barter and converting it in accounts and sending it to your family and all kinds of shit. It's very intricate, but it got done. $3.5 million a year on a prison yard with 1,800 people. Now, if you can't control drugs in a prison yard with round-the-clock security, closed-circuit cameras everywhere except the bathroom and the shower, 24/7, okay? How do you think you're going to stop drugs in the United States? We have to stop turning a health problem into a criminal problem, which is what drugs don't cause crime. Drug laws cause crime. And they cause crime because they make the drugs too fucking expensive. So using the example of heroin, because that's the drug most of us understand what it is. So I'll use it because it's simple. And even a boomer knows what heroin is. I'm not going to get into some of the more esoterics, even though I understand them. I even know how to make meth, if you want to know the truth. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but I learned how to make meth in prison. I could be like, Breaking Bad when I got out. Red iodine, phosphorus, and pseudoephedrine are the 3 ingredients, by the way. But anyway, why anyone would put that in their body, no fucking idea. But here's what it comes down to, by the way. We have to get out of the business of making people's weaknesses a crime. For the people that, first of all, we have to grow up and understand that only about 10% of the population has an addictive personality. 90% of us can use anything we want occasionally and not get addicted to it, including heroin and cocaine and everything else. No one ever talks about it, but we all joke about, we all went through college, or those of us that did, or went through high school or whatever. I used LSD. I took Quaaludes. I did cocaine. I still smoke weed. Well, not occasionally. I smoke it every fucking day. Let's be honest. I live in a state where it's legal. I'm not high now, but I will be. And I enjoy myself. The point is, when I went to prison, I didn't smoke weed for 5 years. It didn't bother me. It's not an addictive drug. It's most people could use anything. And not if heroin were legal, if you asked me, would I try it? Yeah, I'd try it. Absolutely. Because I would never get addicted. I wouldn't inject it. There's all kinds of ways to use heroin. I would smoke it. But just like we did for centuries in opium dens, it's not like this is anything new. Okay, Wyatt Earp was taking laudanum for, his wife was for her headaches. That's just opium in a bottle. It's not. Coca-Cola, it was named Coca-Cola because it was full of cocaine, guys. I mean, we have turned something that was never a problem into a problem and created the same exact thing we had in Prohibition on steroids. And in doing so, we've disrupted all of Latin America, who is disrupted with all this corruption because of our drug habit. If drugs were legal, Mexico South would suddenly go stable and corruption wouldn't be an issue because the cartels would be out of business because the independent producers could produce much cheaper. Because, for example, heroin doesn't have a patentable formula. It's been around since the dawn of time. There is an argument to be made anthropologically that the earliest civilizations were created to farm psychedelics and hops and barley to make beer. That's the whole reason that mankind even developed agriculture, was to get high and drunk. That's it. Okay, when there is a strong case to be made that when Moses saw the burning bush and got the 10 commandments, he was tripping, because if that was an acacia bush, which is the dominant tree in that part of the desert or bush, when you light those on fire, the smoke is hallucinogenic. And they knew that. They had figured that out for a long time. You can get high breathing in the fumes from a burning acacia bush. So there's a lot of truth to this stuff. It all gets mixed up, but here's what it comes down to. Most of us, when drugs are legal, are not going to become addicts. The reason that hardcore addicts become addicts is because their goal in life is not longevity. It is to get through the misery that they view each day of their life as. And we're not going to fix the uncountable reasons why people are deeply unhappy. Okay, and that'll get me to homelessness in just 1 minute. So what I'm saying is, 80% of people in prison are there for drugs or drug-related crimes. So in other words, 36% are there for possession or sale. I would immediately pardon those people. I would expunge their records and let them go back to living their lives. And most violent crime is drug-related because drugs are an illegal business, and in an illegal business, you can't go to court to enforce contracts. So if drugs at every level are a handshake business. So if you fuck somebody on a deal that you've made, their only recourse is violence, whether it's gang violence or cartel violence. I know cartel guys firsthand, and I'm telling you, they would prefer not to be killing everybody. This is not like the movies. They don't get off on it. I'm sure there are a few psychotics out there. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm saying most of these people are business people, entrepreneurs, frankly, providing a product in demand, have to deal with the law, and so have to enforce their contracts this way. The same way that cattle barons in the Old West strung up rustlers when there was no sheriff and no court around. They didn't have time for that. So they would just take them out to a tree, string them up, and it's the same fucking principle. If we make drugs legal, all of that violence goes away. All of that theft goes away. If you've ever been robbed in your life, if drugs were legal, there's a 9 out of 10 chance you would have never been robbed. Never. Okay. And so that's number two. And I could go on, but again, read the white paper on the drug, on the legalizing drugs. That will free up. We've spent way over $1 trillion on the drug war and come to nothing. All that capital can be used for the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is how do we get rid of homelessness. And I'm moving through this fast, but again, it's all on the website. So the homeless population I know a lot about because we use our prisons, our state prisons, which is what I was in, as homeless shelters. That's what the police do with a lot of these homeless. They round them up on bullshit charges, from vagrancy to public exposure to breaking and entering because they were too drunk to know where the fuck they were. By the way, the vast majority of street people are alcoholics, more than any other drug. There are a few junkies, but because alcohol is so cheap and accessible, and because they don't care what they drink, whether it's Sterno or MD 2020, they just don't give a shit, or malt liquor. I know. It just sounds vile. But, that's why they still. I mean, the idea of chugging down a bottle of Green Springs is vile to me, but these guys like it, right? They're not looking for Chateau Lafite, So the bottom line is they're mostly alcoholics. They fall into two categories. The crazies, that's about half of them. Shit crazy. Mostly diagnosed but untreated schizophrenics. And the other half are just hardcore alcoholics. Now, on the and they're all alcoholics. They're all hardcore alcoholics. The schizophrenics choose alcohol and other drugs, but mostly alcohol, to self-medicate because it makes them feel better than the antipsychotic drugs, which deaden them to all feeling. So when you take things like, starts with an L, like lithium. When lithium works, but it makes you feel like a zombie, evidently. I've never taken lithium, but that's what I'm told firsthand by these people. So rather than feel like a zombie all day long, they would prefer to drink themselves into oblivion and at least feel something. Okay. Now, what we do for those people that are undiagnosed, mentally ill, and never going to get better. Right now, the state of psychiatric medicine is we don't really cure anybody. So let's just accept that psychiatry controls and doesn't cure. By the way, I have my own scars. I've seen psychologists and psychiatrists in my life. I'm not pointing a finger, and it's helped me a lot, but my scars are still there. I've just learned to deal with them. And that's the difference, but they're not cured. We don't cure people of their mental scars. That just isn't possible. And so when someone is an out of control schizophrenic, here's what we do. We take some of that money that we're pitching away on the drug war, and we build really nice sanitariums all over the country. And we properly staff them with professionals who know what they're doing. And we give these people a quiet, safe place. And if they want to drink while they're in there for the rest of their lives, let them. Stop trying to save the unsavable. They're not trying to live to be 90, guys. They're just trying to get through the crazy fucking maelstrom of their mind that day. If they want antipsychotic drugs, obviously give it to them. If they want treatment, obviously, and we can pay for all of that with the money we're not pissing away on the drug war. But for the majority, leave them alone. Give them a quiet room and a bottle of whatever they like and let them go to it free of charge. That keeps them off the street. It's better for them. It's better for everybody else. Is it perfect? No. But the enemy of good is perfect. It's so much better than what we do. Rather than leave them on the street to shit on the sidewalks, terrorize the locals, and themselves end up victims of all kinds of crazy violence and shit, let's take some of this blunt money and give them a nice, quiet place to get drunk, basically. Now, on the other hand, let's talk about the ones that are not mentally ill, but are screaming alcoholics and addicts. Again, they have the same motivation. They may not be schizophrenic, but their lives when you hear the stories of what some of these people have been raised from, you just can't appreciate what a horror story some of these people have lived through and still live through. And they're not going to get better. These scars are unfixable. Children, when you're a parent, you'll understand this if you aren't. Children are the receptacles of every unresolved issue they were raised with. So if they're raised in a crazy place, every crazy piece of shit gets downloaded into them and destroys their life. And it's not going to get better. So here's what we do. Okay. I mean, again, I know there's going to be comments. Well, my uncle, I heard, got better. Okay. I'll address that. Here we go. Even the exceptions. Outside of every city and town in America, are places that no one wants to live, industrial areas. Okay. Just, where the warehouses are, where the factories are, all that shit, where the airport is. We buy a big tract of land. Every city does. And on that big tract of land, they put tiny houses. Those little basically studio apartments that look like houses. And we just put as many as necessary for that city's homeless population. And the police, we don't even have to use police. We can have special homeless transport shuttles. And they basically go out with social workers. They find these homeless people and they say, come with us. You're not arrested. This is not a jail. You're not going to get a criminal charge. Come with us. We're going to give you the keys to your own tiny house. You're going to have your own space, your own bathroom, your own kitchen, your own bed, your own place to be private, a lock on the door to keep you safe when you sleep, and all the booze or drugs you want. All you got to do, and you can live here the rest of your life rent-free. You don't have to pay for anything. We'll give you food, we'll give you booze, we'll have a clinic on the site so that if they get sick, there's someone to take care of them. We have drug treatment available for those that want it. If they want it, great. That's how the only way you recover from addiction is because you want to. All the rest of it is all bullshit. And if you don't get to the place where, that's what they call the bottom. That means you got to the place where you really want to for real. Well, very few really want to. They like their lifestyle. But the ones that do, we make it available to them. And of course, we have medical professionals on site for the inevitable overdoses. And some people are going to die. In fact, they're all going to die eventually. But let them live out their life, not in prison, not treated like animals, but leave them to their own devices. If they're over 18 and they're in this position, stop trying to live or treat unlivable things you just can't understand. Let's help all the other people by getting them out of their neighborhoods, and let's help them by giving them their neighborhood. And here's what I learned in prison. Homeless people, when they have a safe place, are very clean. I know that's hard to believe. I know on the streets, they shit on the streets because they have no choice. But when they're in prison, in fact, the guy I paid I paid him 6 jars of peanut butter a month. They cost $1 a jar. And he cleaned my house. That's what they call where you live. They cleaned my laundry, and the guy was amazing. He was a homeless guy. He was awesome. Didn't have a tooth in his head. Absolutely a screaming alcoholic. Drank hooch in prison all the time. But, totally reliable, showed up, did the cleaning, loved him, great guy. But he would have been shit on the street. He could only function in prison. Well, I'm saying these guys aren't felons. They're sad and pathetic. Let's stop treating them like they're felons, but stop treating them also like they're infants. They're adults. They know what they need. Give it to them. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Now we've solved homelessness. Now, the only thing I have left out now to discuss is what do we do about all those kids that are already out there that are already pretty fucked up, but maybe still savable. And they're coming out of prison now, completely unprepared with absolutely no money. And once every felony charge is life. Okay, just understand that. No matter whether it's 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, once you have a felony, it's a life sentence. Because, and I know this from personal experience, once you have a felony conviction, the door is closed to almost everything. Now, someone like me, who I say immodestly, but I know is way above average in intelligence, and it played the game successfully for a long, long time, I can overcome it. But let's also be honest and say 999 out of 1,000 people don't have those tools. Plus, they were raised in families that gave them no understanding of anything at all. They have no chance. They're going to do life on the installment plan. They're going to get out. They're going to get rearrested, come back in, serve, get out, get rearrested, come back in, serve, until they get to, if they live in some states where they get to the, three strikes and you're out, that's okay with them. That doesn't even scare them, because prison is their retirement plan. They get free medical, they get free dental, they get their food. This is not doing anybody. Prison is an industry, not a rehabilitation. Okay, right. So what I propose is prison reform, which again, you can read about this in the white paper, but I pattern it on a combination of the Norwegian prison system and Danish prison system, which is heavily on rehabilitation. Basically, what goes on in prison now, and I can again tell you from firsthand experience, is it doesn't matter how good you are or how hard you try to comply. If two knuckleheads on the yard get into a fight, the whole yard gets punched. And that's backwards and insane. Okay? There should be an incentive system in prison so that the more you comply, the more privileges you earn. So you learn what it is to earn things that you've never learned before in your life, and you have a sense of accomplishment as you achieve different levels. Okay, that's number one. Number two, we've got to segregate when people come into prison the really bad seeds from the good ones. And the way to do that, and again, I say this in the white paper, is with prisoning. When inmates come in, I have prison ink. Did I show you my prison ink? Here's my prison ink. Do you like it? OG with the Star of David. I never hid my Jewishness. By the way, the white guys hated me because they were all Aryan brothers, but I rolled black, and so I got along great with them. Anyway, those goddamn Nazi motherfuckers. By the way, you've never seen anything funnier than the Ask the True religion, you ever heard of that? Ask the True? Thor worshippers. They're in prison. I swear to God. All these Aryan brothers worship Thor, and the religion's called Asatru. ASATRU. Look it up. You'll see I'm not making this shit up. They wear little hammers around their neck. Craziest fucking thing. Okay, back on track. Those guys have to be gotten out of the mix. Those guys, the Aryan brothers and the worst gangsters and the guys that are incorrigible and unfixable, have to be separated from the majority of the prison population that are just sheep. And if you can get those dangerous wolves out of the way, you can remake some of these sheep into normal people. So how do you do that? Is prisoning. Gang ink is easily identifiable by people who know this. Okay, there's a difference between your girlfriend's name on your forearm or the Star of David and 88 on a neck, which is the 8th letter of the alphabet, which is H. So that's code for Heil Hitler on the neck of. You ever see 88 on the neck of a white guy? That's an Aryan brother. Okay, that's Heil Hitler. Okay, or 18, which is AH, Adolf Hitler. That's just. I'm giving you a few examples. Or the SS things, or the Nazi War Eagle, or there are black equivalents to this, there are Chicano equivalents to this. There's all kinds of gang tats for the Bloods, the Crips, whatever gang they're in. When they come to prison, they should be given a choice, but on entry, the state will remove your tats free of charge, or we're going to send you to a segregated yard. Okay, where you can sit there and wallow with the rest of your freaks. Now, hardcore gangsters will never agree to have their ink taken off. They will self-segregate. Okay, we don't have to do a fucking thing, but say they're coming off, or you can go here. They'll go there every time. They consider that a badge of honor. Believe me. Okay, but all the other guys who have their girlfriends' names or their zip codes or whatever silly shit they have tattooed on themselves, don't let it get taken off. Yeah, take it off. They're sick of it already. They already realized they made a horrible mistake.
Yeah, right.
Scott. When my kids, all 4 of my children have ink. And my youngest son, Julian, is an artist. So he really has ink. He has got a sleeve in his wife. And very cool kid. I adore him. But Julian will tell you the best piece of advice I ever gave him was, and I gave it to all the kids, if you want to have ink, that's fine. Here's what you do. Draw a picture of whatever it is that you want to have put on your body and tape it to your mirror where you shave or prepare yourself and look at it for a year. And if a year later you still like it, go ahead.
Yeah. That would have. I wish somebody would have given me that advice. Ooh.
That's just. I'm not against ink. Just make sure that Anyway, so we've segregated out the gangsters and the really bad guys from the guys that are malleable. Those guys go through basic training. We basically get retired drill instructors from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. We bring them in. And we put these kids through no weapons, obviously, but everything else, the marching, so they learn teamwork, so they learn that to be a good order giver, you have to be a good order taker. So they learn all the lessons a father would have taught them: boundaries, how to clean up after themselves, personal responsibility, so on and so forth. And once they graduate from that, then they go to work in productive industries from the outside. It's all done through private. And that's done today, by the way. But the difference is now the inmates get 50 cents an hour and the state keeps all the rest. Okay, I'm saying pay the inmates the whole thing. And then so let's say that the job pays the minimum wage, which let's just say for the sake of argument in your state is $10 an hour. I'm just picking that out of the air. And because it's a round number. Well, then you can charge them 30% of that $10, $3 to pay for their rent and overhead to help reimburse some of the cost of their own incarceration. But now they understand we're starting to teach them budgeting, because on the outside, a third of your budget goes to where you live typically. So we're teaching them what it is, right? These are lessons that they should have learned at home, but they didn't. Then they can, out of that $10, we can pay 10% of that to restitution to as many baby mamas as they have. So the baby mamas start getting some money when they were getting nothing at all. Okay. And they never have wives. They're always baby moms. Anyway. And then the rest gets put into an account for them at interest until they get out. So when they're released, okay. Oh, are we running out of time? Okay. So let me wrap it up, because obviously I could go on and on and on. And I apologize because I can never shut up.
I think it's very, very interesting. I'm just 40 minutes over. So
Okay. So let's go to the 1964plan.org. There are two ways that you can help. The first way is obviously donate money. We don't care how much, $5, $10, whatever makes you happy. Again, I'm unaware of how much we're raising, but we would obviously love, and what that goes to pay for is putting me on the road. I'm going to go out and I'm going to start speaking at colleges and civic groups and all around the country. And believe me, you could just have to take this for my word. I'm a great public speaker, and I'm going to go out and spread the word and the message where it goes. The second way you can help us is volunteer, because obviously we would like to set up an organized movement so that when the end comes, and it's imminent, my friends, and there's a connection to my Substack and to my podcast and things on the website. So feel free to read all the stuff I've written. You'll get a good idea of where I'm coming from. In fact, I'm going to write a new Substack today after we're done. And I don't know if you've read any of my Substack, but I really lay it out. Believe me,
you do a great job. I mean, the website in itself is incredible. Like I don't want the fact that we are way over time and I'm way late for an appointment to change this statement. I love what you're talking about. I think that you have some very great ideas. I mean, I'm a fan of you. I really am. I don't want to be rude by going, even to Christmas when it's over.
We'll do it again. We'll do it again.
Yeah, I'd love to have you again. This is fascinating.
Look, this is what I'm doing. I'm committed to it. God bless America. I'm just trying to save our country and our culture. And no one's going to do that by running for office, folks. We're going to have to do it ourselves. We're going to have to force the political class to do the right thing rather than wait for them to do it, because if we wait, we're all going to be gone.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Herbie, God bless you, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate it. And Josh, let's do this again. Seriously, I have nothing but a great time with you, man.
We will do it again.
Peace out. Have a great day.
You, brother. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Wow. Yeah, that went way over. But I really like what he's saying. And man, if he could learn how to speak in sound bites, they would probably let him on cable news. But, I don't think that his information is the kind that does well with sound bites. In fact, I would bet if you sound bited what he talked about, he probably would need private security 24 hours a day. Wow. Check him out. 1964 plan. Herbie K. Thank you for being here, everyone. God bless. Bye-bye.